Happy New Year, everyone. I don't know about you, but I always get a little curious about the traditions we follow,
Oh, yeah.
especially one as global as New Year's.
It's true.
You think about it. Almost every culture has some way of marking the start of a new year.
Yeah, there's something really compelling about that shared experience.
And we're all about exploring those shared experiences here on the Deep Dive.
Right.
We've got a whole stack of research, historical accounts, and even some modern takes on New Year's to dig into today.
Okay.
Our mission to understand how this celebration has evolved over centuries,
Hmm.
and maybe even uncover some surprising facts along the way.
Sounds like a journey I'm ready to take. I'm
Yeah.
always amazed by how much history is packed into even our most common traditions.
Speaking of history,
Okay.
our sources point us all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia,
Right.
to the Babylonians
Yeah.
and their 11-day New Year's festival called Akitu.
Akitu is fascinating because it wasn't just a celebration, it was deeply intertwined with Babylonian religion and politics. They celebrated the victory of their god Marduk over chaos and symbolically renewed their king's rule.
So it's a pretty big deal, huh? It
Yeah.
makes our New Year's Eve parties look kind of tame.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is that Akitu was tied to the vernal equinox,
Right.
the start of spring.
That connection to the natural world is really important. You see it with other ancient civilizations too.
Uh-huh.
The Egyptians linked their new year to the flooding of the Nile, a vital event for their agriculture.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that flood usually happened around the time the star Sirius rose in the sky.
So they were looking to the stars for clues about when to celebrate. I guess that makes sense before calendars were a thing.
Right.
But they weren't the only ones, were they?
Not at all. The Chinese New Year began with the second new moon after the winter solstice, another astronomical marker.
Okay.
The Persians, like the Babylonians, celebrated around the vernal equinox, while the ancient Greeks opted for the winter solstice as their New Year's starting point.
It seems like everyone had their own way of deciding when to celebrate.
Yeah.
So how did we all end up agreeing on January 1st?
That's where the Romans come in.
Okay.
Their early calendar only had 10 months and actually started in March. But then Julius Caesar decided to shake things up.
Oh, wow.
In 46 BC, he introduced the Julian calendar, which, as you might guess, is where we get July from.
Julius Caesar always making history.
Yeah.
But why did he decide on January 1st as the start of the year?
Well, part of it was a nod to Janus, the Roman god of beginnings.
Hmm.
Janus had two faces, one looking back and one looking forward, which made him a fitting symbol for a time of transition.
Okay.
Plus, January was already a month of festivities and celebrations for the Romans.
So they were already in a party mood.
Yeah.
But did our sources mention something about this January 1st tradition getting interrupted during the Middle Ages?
You're right. During that time, some Christian leaders decided to shift the new year to align with important religious dates like Christmas or the Feast of the Annunciation.
So for a while, the start of the year was kind of a moving target again.
Yeah.
But it sounds like things eventually settled down.
Yes, they did.
Hmm.
Pope Gregory III came along in 1582 and decided it was time for another calendar reset.
Okay.
He introduced the Gregorian calendar, which is the one most of the world uses today, and put January 1st back in its place as New Year's Day.
Case closed.
Right.
But here's a fun fact from our sources. Not everyone jumped on board right away.
Oh.
Britain and its American colonies actually stuck with their March New Year all the way until 1752.
It goes to show how deeply ingrained traditions can be, even when it comes to something as seemingly straightforward as a calendar. But speaking of traditions, I think it's time we explore how different cultures around the world celebrate New Year's, even as January 1st became more widely accepted.
I'm all for it. Let's dive into some of those global traditions.
Okay.
Where should we start?
How about a trip to Scotland for Hogmanay?
Hogmanay. Now that's a word I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Hogmanay is a truly unique New Year's celebration known for its boisterous nature. It's rooted in pagan winter solstice festivals, and it involves bonfires, torchlight processions, and a whole lot of celebrating.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense. I
Yeah.
bet their New Year's Eve parties are a sight to behold.
They definitely are. They even have this tradition called first footing, where the first person to enter your home in the new year is thought to influence your luck for the whole year.
So you better make sure your first visitor is someone who brings good vibes.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure for a New Year's guest.
Absolutely. Now, while we're on the topic of distinct New Year's customs, we can't forget about Chinese New Year, also known as Lunar New Year.
Oh, yes. I've always been fascinated by Chinese New Year, The dragon dances,
Yeah.
the red envelopes, the incredible food. It's such a visual and cultural feast.
It really is. And something that's important to remember is that Chinese New Year follows a lunisolar calendar, meaning its date on our Gregorian calendar changes every year.
Right.
It usually falls somewhere between January 21st and February 20th.
So it's a celebration that marches to the beat of its own lunar drum. What are some of the key traditions that stand out to you?
Well, before the new year arrives, there's the custom of sweeping of the grounds to symbolically clear out any bad luck.
Okay.
Then comes the feasting, giving red envelopes filled with money to family members, and of course the iconic lion and dragon dances, often accompanied by firecrackers and drumming.
Don't forget the fireworks.
Yeah.
They really go all out with the celebration.
And then to top it all off, there's the Lantern Festival, which is the grand finale of the festivities.
Oh,
It's a dazzling display of colorful lanterns, and they have all sorts of symbolic foods like dumplings and rice cakes.
sounds delicious.
Just a truly magical way to end the celebrations.
Okay, so we've got ancient Babylonian rituals, Roman calendar reforms, a fiery Scottish celebration, and a vibrant Chinese New Year. What's the common thread here?
It seems that even with the global adoption of the Gregorian calendar and January 1st as New Year's Day, many cultures continue to honor their own unique traditions alongside it.
So it's a blending of old and new ancient customs intertwined with more modern practices. It's kind of like how we celebrate New Year's today. We've got the countdown and fireworks, but we also have our own family traditions and personal ways of marking the occasion.
Exactly. For example, the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, falls sometime between September and October on the Gregorian calendar,
Right.
and the Islamic New Year, which starts with the month of Muharram, also follows a lunar calendar. Then there's Nowruz, the Persian New Year, an ancient festival still celebrated as a cultural New Year in many parts of the world.
It's incredible to see how this concept of a new year has evolved into so many diverse forms, each rich with its own history and meaning.
And that enduring power of cultural traditions brings us to the modern era. Makes you wonder, what are the customs that have stuck with us, shaping how we celebrate today?
That's a great question. I'm ready to dive into the modern world of New Year celebrations and see how those traditions, both old and new, continue to weave their magic.
I think you'll be surprised by how much those ancient influences still resonate with us today. You know, as we were talking about those diverse New Year celebrations from around the world, it really struck me how each culture has found its own unique way to express that universal desire for a fresh start.
It's true. Whether it's through ancient rituals or modern-day parties, that feeling of hitting the reset button seems to resonate with people across time and cultures. What do you think it is about a new year that makes us want to reflect and set intentions for the future?
I think it's partly about the symbolism of a clean slate. The turning of the calendar gives us a tangible marker for letting go of the past and embracing new possibilities. It's like a collective deep breath, a chance to step back and say, okay, what do I want to create in this next chapter?
And it's interesting how those intentions often manifest in traditions like making New Year's resolutions. Remember how we talked about the ancient Babylonians making promises to their gods during Akitu? It seems like that desire to improve ourselves with the start of a new year is something that's been around for centuries.
It's a fascinating connection, isn't it? From ancient rituals to modern-day goal setting, that impulse to use the new year as a catalyst for personal growth seems to be a thread that runs through human history. But speaking of traditions, I'm curious about how those global New Year's customs we discussed have evolved in the modern world. Have they managed to hold on to their unique identities in the face of globalization, or have they become more homogenized?
That's a great question. It would be a shame to lose those unique cultural flavors. What do our sources say?
It seems like it's a bit of a mixed bag. Globalization has definitely led to some sharing and blending of customs, but many cultures have also fought hard to preserve their unique New Year's traditions.
I'm glad to hear that. Do you have any specific examples of traditions that have managed to retain their distinctive character?
Well, take Hogmanay in Scotland, for example. It's still going strong today with those massive fire festivals and torchlight processions attracting visitors from all over the world. And those traditions are deeply rooted in Scottish history and folklore.
I can only imagine the energy of those celebrations. It must feel like stepping back in time. What about Chinese New Year? It's celebrated by millions of people worldwide, but has it managed to hold on to its traditional roots?
Absolutely. Chinese New Year has become a global phenomenon, but at its heart, it's still very much about honoring family ancestors and cultural heritage. The vibrant parades and dragon dances are incredible spectacles, but they're also expressions of deep cultural meaning.
It's amazing how those traditions can bridge continents and generations, connecting people to their heritage even when they're far from their homelands. But within those larger celebrations, I imagine there are also smaller, more intimate traditions that families pass down through generations.
You're absolutely right. Family recipes for special New Year's dishes, rituals for honoring ancestors, unique ways of decorating homes. Those personal touches are what make these celebrations truly meaningful and connect people to their family history.
It's like a beautiful layering of cultural experiences, from the grand public displays to those cherished family customs. It makes you realize that New Year's isn't just about one day. It's about carrying traditions forward and making them your own.
Speaking of traditions, remember how we talked about food playing a central role in so many New Year celebrations around the world? I think it's time we dig a little deeper into those culinary customs that add so much flavor and symbolism to the occasion.
Oh, yes. I'm always up for a good food-themed deep dive. What are some of the most interesting food traditions you came across in your research?
Well, for starters, we have those lucky legumes we talked about earlier. The lentils in Italy and the black-eyed peas in the southern U.S. It's fascinating how similar beliefs about prosperity and good fortune have sprung up independently in different parts of the world.
It speaks to a kind of shared human desire for abundance and good luck, doesn't it? It's like we're all looking for those little rituals that might give us an edge in the new year.
Absolutely. And those symbolic foods go way beyond legumes. In some cultures, pork is considered a lucky New Year's dish, symbolizing progress and moving forward. In others, ring-shaped cakes and pastries represent the year coming full circle, a sense of completion and renewal.
And let's not forget those delicious rice puddings in Sweden and Norway with the hidden almond. Whoever finds the almond gets a year of good luck, right?
Exactly. It's like a culinary treasure hunt. And in many parts of Europe, they eat greens like cabbage or collard greens on New Year's because they're thought to resemble paper money and bring financial prosperity. Each culture has its own unique spin on these traditions, blending flavor with symbolism in a way that's both fascinating and delicious.
It's like a global culinary adventure. Each dish tells a story about cultural beliefs and hopes for the new year. All this talk about food is making me hungry. But before we take a break for some New Year's snacks, I'm curious about something else. Our sources mention folktales and legends associated with the new year. What can you tell us about those?
Ah, yes. The stories we tell ourselves are just as important as the foods we eat. In many cultures, these New Year's tales serve to explain the origins of certain customs or to teach lessons about the importance of fresh starts and new beginnings.
Do you have a favorite New Year's legend? I'm always up for a good story.
One that comes to mind is the tale of Nian, a fearsome beast in Chinese mythology who was said to prey on people on New Year's Eve.
Oh, that sounds a bit scary. Not exactly the way you want to start the year.
But the people learned that Neon was terrified of loud noises, bright lights, and the color red, so they used firecrackers, lanterns, and red decorations to scare him away.
That's clever. So those vibrant Chinese New Year traditions we talked about are actually rooted in this ancient legend.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the most festive customs often have deeper meanings and origins. They connect us to the past in ways we might not even realize.
That's what I love about exploring traditions. They're like windows into history, culture, and the human experience. But as much as I love learning about these tangible aspects of New Year's celebrations, I'm also curious about the less tangible side. What about the emotions and reflections that accompany this time of year? I mean, beyond the parties and fireworks, there's often a sense of introspection that comes with a new year, is there?
You've hit on something really important. Beyond all the outward festivities, there's definitely a powerful undercurrent of contemplation and reflection that runs through New Year's. It's like a collective pause, a moment to look back on the year that's passed and consider what lies ahead.
It's almost like a global moment of mindfulness, wouldn't you say? A time to acknowledge both the joys and challenges we've experienced and to prepare ourselves for the new year.
Exactly. It's a time for gratitude, for acknowledging both the good and the bad, and for letting go of what no longer serves us. It's about saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new with a sense of hope and renewal.
And those emotions, those reflections are often heightened by the rituals and traditions we've been discussing, aren't they? Think about the singing of Old Lang Syne or the sharing of those symbolic foods. They're not just actions, they're expressions of shared feelings and experiences.
You're absolutely right. Those traditions create a framework for us to experience those emotions collectively, to feel connected to something larger than ourselves. Whether it's a family gathering, a religious ceremony, or simply a quiet moment of reflection, those rituals help us tap into the deeper meaning of the new year.
It's like a powerful blend of the personal and the universal, the individual and the collective, all converging in this one celebration. It's no wonder New Year's continues to resonate with people all over the world. But before we get too philosophical, I think it's time we turn our attention to our listeners. We've explored so many fascinating New Year's traditions from around the world, but I'm curious about what personal traditions or rituals our listeners have created to mark this special occasion.
That's a fantastic question. After all, as we've seen, culture is a living, evolving thing, constantly being shaped and reshaped by individual experiences and interpretations. So tell us, dear listeners, what are your New Year's traditions? What rituals bring you joy and meaning at this time of year? We'd love to hear your stories.
It's amazing to think about how all these traditions, the ones we've inherited, the ones we create ourselves,
Right.
shape our experience of this global celebration.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that New Year's is more than just a date on a calendar. It's a tapestry woven from history, culture, and personal meaning.
What I find fascinating is that even as the world changes around us, certain elements of New Year's celebrations remain remarkably constant. That desire for a fresh start, that hope for a brighter future, those seem to be universal human impulses that transcend time and place.
It's like that yearning for renewal is woven into our very DNA. Whether it's expressed through ancient Babylonian rituals or modern-day resolutions, we seem to be hardwired to seek out those moments of new beginnings.
And it's often those simple, everyday traditions that resonate most deeply. The gathering of loved ones, the sharing of a special meal, the raising of a glass at midnight. Those seemingly small gestures carry a surprising amount of emotional weight.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the most meaningful rituals are the ones we create ourselves, the ones that reflect our own personal values and experiences. It's about finding what resonates with you and making it your own.
Exactly. And as we move further into the 21st century, I'm curious to see how those personal traditions will continue to shape and evolve the larger landscape of New Year celebrations. Will we see new rituals emerge as technology plays a greater role in how we connect and celebrate? It's an exciting thought.
It really is. It makes you wonder what New Year's will look like 100 years from now.
Right.
But one thing is for sure, that fundamental human need for reflection, renewal, and connection will continue to drive our desire to mark the passage of time and the arrival of a new year.
Beautifully said. And on that note of reflection and renewal, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of New Year's celebrations.
It's been an incredible journey, hasn't it? From ancient Mesopotamia to modern-day celebrations, we've explored the customs, beliefs, and emotions that have shaped this global phenomenon for centuries.
We've seen how different cultures around the world have put their own unique spin on marking the turning of the year, adding their own flavors and symbolism to the celebration.
And we've discovered that despite all those differences, there's a common thread of hope, renewal, and a desire for connection that binds us all together as we say goodbye to the old and embrace the new.
So as you raise a glass to 2025, remember that the magic of New Year's lies not just in the grand public displays, but also in those small personal moments that make this time of year so special.
Whether it's a cherished family tradition passed down through generations or a new ritual you create for yourself, take a moment to savor those connections, those reflections, and those hopes that make this a truly unique time of year.
From all of us here at The Deep Dive, we wish you a happy, healthy, and fulfilling 2025.
May your year be filled with joy, laughter, and those special moments that make life worth celebrating. Cheers to a brand new year.